kind of separate them off into another taxonomy and say that, yeah, there are other deities, they're sons of gods, but they're angels, and they're this inferior taxonomic category, and so we don't have to worry about them when we perceive of God. And in my opinion, this is where the idea of monotheism comes from. The idea that
at Qumran?
Well, I'm going to say that Qumran is just a manifestation of this development.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
It's about that time period, but it spreads much wider than Qumran. And so...
So you would probably, in some respects, disagree with Heiser, who, if I understand him correctly, you've read his PhD dissertation. I ran and raved about that on the internet for a while. It's an awesome dissertation. However, he is claiming that Jehovah is species unique from the very beginning.
Right.
And you think he's more or less, it's probably because of your work in the Hebrew, what psalm is it? I'm going to blow it. 82, okay. I knew it was either 82 or 89. But
89 has some good stuff in it too.
It does. So you think the species unique theme in antiquity comes later?
I do think it comes later, and that's two places where Michael Heiser and I disagree most clearly. And one is the provenance of this idea of species uniqueness. The other is the distinction between Jehovah and El, whether or not they were considered distinct deities early on. And so
and your argument is they are or aren't?
That they were.
That they were.
That they
okay.
were.
So
that, Deuteronomy.
So you would say the Hebrew Elohim as such, or the Hebrew El, or the Ugaritic El as far as that goes, is a distinct deity from Jehovah, from Yahweh.
In my opinion, Jehovah is a southern deity that was introduced into the Israelite pantheon probably around the time shortly before the rise of the Israelite state. And the pantheon that he was introduced to was your stereotypical Canaanite pantheon that had El as the high god and on down, which is why I think we find the most polemic against Baal. No polemic against the Canaanite El, all the polemic is against Baal, because in my opinion, that is the Canaanite cognate for Jehovah. It's the storm deity. And so you find the most...
So instead of using Baal, the Hebrews they put Yahweh in Baal's place.
Right, and then...
Not to replace Elohim, but just to be
Not originally, but then with the rise of the Israelite state, and this is something a couple other scholars have concluded, that there was a conflation of El and Jehovah at the rise of the Israelite state in an effort to consolidate ideologically everybody under their agenda.
Okay.
So about the time of Saul or David or Solomon, they decided, look, we have two different cultic groups here, we need them to be one. And so I think it was a slow process, and it's obviously something that can't be really proved. But I hope to argue in my PhD dissertation ultimately that the evidence points most clearly to that conclusion. And
to a conflating of the two deities.
Right, to an original distinction and a conflation. Now, a lot of scholars...
Okay, so you got to admit to me, though, actually, Michael Heiser's PhD dissertation is pretty darn good on the Council of the Gods. I've never seen, from my limited exposure to the scholarly literature, I was electrified that a Christian scholar can actually defend the theme of the Council of the Gods all the way up into and say the basis of the New Testament is the Council of the Gods. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a groundbreaking thesis, or dissertation, pardon me. Not only because he's a Christian scholar, but I think it's groundbreaking, period.
It is.
Because it's the first publication to really explore the development of the Divine Council into second period Judaism. Prior to that, there was Mullen's Divine Assembly book, which was, I think, 80 or 81 when it was written.
Yeah, it was
and it pretty
a couple
much
decades ago.
Yeah, it pretty much stays in the early Israelite period. So I think Heiser did a great service to scholarship with that dissertation. Obviously, there are some points that we disagree on. There are a lot of points that we agree on, too. And so I hope that... and I think it is happening that his dissertation has catalyzed more interest in the Divine Council, even within conservative Christian communities, because I've got 2 more master's theses that have been published that I've seen in the last 3 years from conservative Christian universities dealing directly with the Divine Council, and one of them that I just found 2 weeks ago. And so they are obviously they're having to take notice of it, and I think that's a great thing.
It's interesting how this theme now, because it seems to have what I would term, for lack of a better term, a little bit of archaeological teeth to it at this point, because of the Ugaritic texts and even the Dead Sea Scrolls. Heiser that was one of the best parts of his thesis, in my opinion. His dissertation was, his analysis of the Dead Sea Scrolls was something else.
Yeah.
I was pretty shocked.
He's, I really appreciated that too. And so that's going to be a good resource for me when I get to writing my own dissertation.
Wonderful.
And even at Oxford, I took a class on archaeology from Garth Gilmore, who's one of their, they don't call them professors until they're way up there, but he's one of the lecturers on archaeology, and he's really great. And there is a lot of archaeological data out there that can be, well, that needs to be incorporated into this discussion of the Divine Council.
It does. Well, I mean, it seems like it has gone from a trickle to a steady stream, and the stream seems to be widening. There just appears to me in the scholarly journals more and more and more articles on this subject. I mean, from various different, from basically all over the world. I mean,
when I presented a paper, my Oxford thesis is actually based on a paper I presented at last year's SBL, entitled basically the same thing, but it was in the textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible section, and Brent Strawn was the chair of this session, and he's from Emory University, and he actually sat down and said, hey, I'm actually publishing a paper with HTR, Harvard Theological Review, on Psalm 28. And after the paper, I sat down and talked with a gentleman named Jan Houston, who is a European scholar who just a couple years ago published something on Deuteronomy 32:8 in Vetus Testamentum, on the idea that the Dead Sea Scroll variant for Deuteronomy 32:8, where in the Masoretic text it says "sons of Israel," the other verse. Septuagint, we have Angelon Theu, angels of God. The Dead Sea Scrolls, we have B'nai Elohim. He's saying that even before all this, he thinks it was B'nai Shar El, which would have been sons of Bull El. And so that's a really interesting article that he argues for that. But he's got some more work that he's doing on Deuteronomy 32:8 and
I found, I'll bet just in my own research, I've got at least 6 or 7 different articles on Deuteronomy 32 from 6 or 7 different scholars discussing that Council of the Gods thing.
Yeah, there are a lot
in
of
there. Can't remember the guy in Herschel Shank's book on understanding of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I can't remember his name. I've used him in some of my videos where he talks about that Dead Sea Scroll fragment that he says shows absolutely that the B'nai Yisrael were the B'nai Elohim, and he shows that Dead Sea Scroll fragment. I thought, really kind of interesting to see the fragment itself and read it. And so this is a fun subject. So you pick the Old Testament. Are you doing anything with the New Testament? You're going to stay old stuff, the Old Testament?
It took a long time for me to decide. When I got into the Ancient Near Eastern Studies program at BYU, I decided to emphasize Hebrew Bible Old Testament, or Hebrew Old Testament, and I minored in Greek. And I ended up taking more Greek classes than Hebrew because I wanted to leave the option open, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to get into Old Testament, New Testament, what I wanted to do. The first paper I've ever published was actually on patristics.
Really? Yeah.
So,
isn't that interesting? Yeah.
So I was.
Well, there's a topic to keep you busy for your life.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I decided not to do that is because that field is just enormous.
Oh, it's